This is Cliff Brockman. I'm a retired professor at Wartburg College, and today I'm speaking with Joel Hermann, who recently retired as the news director of KAYL Radio. I think it's called Storm Lake Radio now, isn't it, Joel?
Yes, KAYL and KKIA.
Okay. And Joel and I started together, or pretty close together, at KAYL back in the mid to late 70s. I was news director, and Joel, you were a staff announcer, as we used to call it, and the music director, as I think I recall.
Yes.
And I left after 6 years, but you stayed. In fact, you stayed for 41 years, which is pretty unusual. I guess not totally unusual, but pretty unusual these days, especially in a small market radio station. One of the things that seems obvious is why'd you stay for 41 years?
Well, I just liked the town, and the station changed hands a few times over the years, but all of the different owners were always very good to me, and it was just a nice place to work.
And you must have made a lot of friends over those times?
Yeah, it was kind of, I thought a few times of leaving, but decided I really like being here in Storm Lake.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to retire now?
Well, last winter, I kind of got tired of either having to go out at 4:30 in the morning and remove the snow off my driveway, or if that was too much to do, walk to work, which is only about 12 minutes, but that's an awful long 12 minutes in a blizzard. And so I kind of was thinking maybe before winter sets in next year, I can figure out I can retire. And I was going to retire at the end of the year, and then I thought, why not retire when the weather's still nice? So I retired at the end of August.
Oh, good idea. What are you going to do now?
Well, I'm never getting up at 4:30 in the morning again. And I have a number of projects to do around the house. I have some volunteer work that I've been doing for quite a while at our church, and they already got me on the board of trustees my second day of retirement. So I'm sure there'll probably be some other people asking me to volunteer.
Yes, one of my professors one time from when I was in college retired, and he told me that as soon as they found out that he could walk and breathe at the same time, why they put him on all kinds of boards. So maybe that'll happen with you.
And my parents live about 3.5 hours away, and I need to probably see them more often, and it will be a little easier being able to go during the week instead of always having to be on a weekend.
You mentioned you had several changes in ownership over the years. How has the radio station there changed as those ownership changes have come along?
Well, it's changed substantially. The biggest change that we finally moved out of the location we've been in since 1948, and which was a second floor downtown, and increasingly not very convenient, hard to find a place to park. The air conditioning and heating didn't always work. And so I guess it was about 9 years ago, the present owners bought a building, which is on the main highway going through Storm Lake, right across from the high school. So we're on the first floor. We have a parking lot, and it's just been much easier, and the heat and the air conditioning always work. But originally, it was locally owned, and then we were owned by a small group of stations, and that actually was an improvement. And then there was some corporate owners, a couple of different corporate ownerships, and it seemed to me that their objective in owning small market radio stations was take as much money out of them as possible to pay for some bigger market stations that weren't doing very well. And so we were kind of relieved about 10 years ago when we went back to a small group ownership. And it's been quite an improvement.
Mm-hmm. Over that time, of course, there have been plenty of technology changes. What are a couple of big things that you can remember?
Well, we don't have those old teletypes and typewriters like we did when you were working at KAYL. And, of course, everything now is a computer file. We don't play tapes or, of course, records. Or most of our staff probably doesn't even remember what a record is. But I think as far as news, besides a computer, rather than a typewriter, it's the digital recorders. you can remember going to a Storm Lake school board meeting, and they took 2 hours, and you had it all on cassette, and it took forever to fast forward and rewind to find that actuality you wanted. Now on digital, it takes about a couple of seconds. So that, I think, is the one single technology change.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been a lot over the years. Of course, radio stations used to be all live. Now they're automated a good share of the time. You can come in the evening if there's weather or something like that and record some announcements, stick them in. You don't have to wait until the song's over. Of course, we have also multiple stations, which before it was just one. Now we have two here in KAYL and KKIA. But doing some things, it's actually easier doing them for two than it used to be for one.
How has Storm Lake changed over that time? I remember there's been, a few years ago, there were several national stories done because of the changing population and culture there in Storm Lake. Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I first moved here, it was pretty much all white. Now it's not. I think our local school district is something like 54% Hispanic, 18% Asian, and 6% white, or what they now call non-Hispanic Caucasian. So yeah, it's been a huge change as far as demographics. The town has gotten somewhat bigger. There's a housing shortage right now, as the Tyson plants have gotten bigger. And that's kind of a change too, because the two major employers are the pork plant and the turkey plant, and Tyson now owns both of them. We've replaced most of the schools over the years that I've been here. In fact, I guess there's a bond issue coming up soon for an additional new school because the schools are overcrowded, which is a problem a lot of school districts don't have. They have declining enrollment here. It goes up every year. So there's been some changes that way. It's gotten bigger where a lot of the smaller communities around the state and county seat towns aren't seeing increases in population. But yeah, the demographics have changed considerably.
And that's because of the packing plants?
Yes, mostly they brought in employees from other areas. I'm sure you probably never ever would have considered KAYL AM would broadcast in any language other than English, but for the past quite a few years it's been in Spanish. So that has made a change. Obviously, I don't do anything in Spanish. We do run some news on there in English, but it's been accepted by the advertisers and the public, and there were some complaints when we first went to it, but they died down pretty quickly.
So that's the AM that broadcasts in Spanish?
Yes.
And then the other two stations are traditional type of radio stations?
Yeah, KAYL FM is sort of full service and pop music. We have half-hour newscasts, 7, noon, and 5. There's the rest of the newscasts are quite short, though, which is a change from when you were here. Network news is 1 minute. The local news, other than those 3 major newscasts, is 1 minute. And then KKIA is the country station. Again, it's 1 minute network news, and the local news is about 1.5 minutes. So it's primarily a music station.
Yeah, when I was there, I remember we had long newscasts, 10-minute newscasts, sometimes 15-minute newscasts were our major newscasts. So, yeah, things have changed quite a bit.
And 5 minutes of network news, I think, every hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Well, over this years, what are maybe 1 or 2 big stories that you've covered?
Well, the biggest or most memorable was Lauren Stark. This was in, I think it was 1994, a young woman who attempted to kill her daughters by slashing their throats. And that was bad enough, but then the hearings on her sanity continued for several years, and it was probably the biggest story and probably the most difficult to cover, and it was beginning to think, is this story ever going to go away? Because it just continued for so long. Eventually, they changed her medication, and she basically became a different person. And also, the grandmother got custody of the two little girls, and eventually I started going to a church that family went to, and I saw the girls grow up. So I think that made it easier, I think, to kind of deal with the story. That would have been the biggest and also the hardest.
Yeah, I bet. Well, on the other side, do you have maybe a funny anecdote you can tell us about?
Well, probably the second biggest story was the Flight 232, and the big part from the airplane landed in Buena Vista County, and there was a long search for that part. And there was a man from General Electric, because they made the part, who was based out of our sheriff's office, and he would not talk to the local reporters. We weren't important enough. So if I wanted to get any information from him, I had to call. At that time, we had UPI as our teletype service. I had to call down to Des Moines to UPI, and then they would call him. He would talk to them because they were big time and we weren't. And early one morning, must have been about 6, I get a call from CBS in New York. Now, we weren't and never have been a CBS affiliate, wanting to know if we were going to cover the press conference that morning in Storm Lake and the big part thing. And I said, well, yes, of course. I got off the phone, but what press conference? Do nothing about it. Finally was able to get a hold of the sheriff. And it was at 8 o'clock in some lawyer's office. We sent our general manager, because I was live on the air at 8 o'clock. Turned out all it was a press release that, of course, some years later would have been faxed to us, and years after that emailed. But just because he refused to talk to the local reporters, I had to go through all that just to cover his press release.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Well, and we just passed the anniversary of Flight 232. I think it was the 30th anniversary as well. So, yeah.
And the pilot just passed away.
He did, right. Yeah. Well, you said that you're not going to miss getting up early in the morning. What will you miss?
Well, I'll miss the people at the radio station. Some of them have been there for a long time, and when I announced a month ago that I was going to retire, several of them, in fact, all of them said, you can't retire. You've been here as long as I have. You've always been here. And so I did go back longer than anybody else there, although our general manager has been there an awful long time, 30-some years, I think. And our engineer's been around for a long time. But for most of our staff, I've just always been there. And I'm not anymore. And they're still on the air, so I guess they're getting along without me. But yes, I will miss seeing them every day. But in fact, I got on our website last week, was reading some news stories. I keep calling it our website. I'm not a part of it anymore. And I noticed that the city council had met. And it didn't even occur to me that the city council was going to meet, even though I'd covered them twice a month for decades. So I guess I've already forgetting things. And maybe that's a good sign.
Yeah, maybe it is. You're easing right into that retirement quickly, huh? Just one last question. Somebody who's starting out in radio news, what advice might you give them?
Well, you need to know about computers and how all that stuff works. You can be taught that, but you probably should know as much as you can. You can also be taught, some of the other jobs, because typically doing news, you also get stuck doing some other odd things, like occasionally running the board during ball games and things like that. But you also have to be inquisitive, and you also have to be able to have a good working knowledge of a lot of things, not just journalism, but you have to, if you're covering school board meetings, you have to have some idea of what school districts do, and you have counties and things like that. But also you need the ability to write. And we've had people come through the station over the years, and that's kind of the biggest problem I see with some of them. Their writing skills aren't the best, and I can't teach that. Maybe some people can. I can't. But you need to have that ability to be able to write and be inquisitive about things and work strange hours.
That's for sure.
especially when you're stuck doing one of those board op ball games, and you're the last person to leave the station at night, and the first one there at 5 a.m. Once in a while that happens.
Yeah. One of the things I tried to teach the students before I retired was always talk to them about writing, because that's one of the things that I always heard from every news director, every place I visited, including you, is that writing is so important, more important than just about anything, just as you've said. So I think that's good advice.
And it also opens up some other opportunities, because radio stations always need people to write commercials and write promotions and things like that.
Well, Joel, I think that'll be enough. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. So thanks a lot.
Sure.
Have a good retirement.
Thank you.